The Galactic Empire had long prided itself on its intricate web of diplomacy, a delicate balance maintained by the sharp minds and steady hands of its most skilled negotiators. Among them, Ambassador Kayla Vera stood as a paragon of grace and intellect, her reputation preceding her like a shadow across the stars. For decades, she had navigated the treacherous waters of intergalactic politics, her voice a calming force in the face of chaos. But even Kayla, with her unshakable poise, could feel the weight of the Empire's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. She was not just a diplomat, she was a symbol, a living testament to the Empire's belief in the power of diplomacy. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, a storm brewed, one that threatened to unravel everything she had worked for. The Empire's reliance on women like Kayla was no accident. Centuries of tradition had cemented their role as the galaxy's peacekeepers, their ability to empathize and negotiate seen as unparalleled. But this reliance had also bred complacency. The Empire's leaders, a council of aging men who had long since forgotten the taste of conflict, had grown accustomed to delegating the messy work of diplomacy to others. They sat in their gilded chambers, issuing decrees and expecting results, while women like Kayla bore the brunt of their decisions. It was a system that worked, until it didn't. The first cracks appeared during the Zephyrian Crisis, a dispute over resource-rich border planets that threatened to escalate into full-scale war. Kayla, dispatched to mediate, found herself facing not only the Zephyrian delegation but also the Empire's own short-sightedness. The Council, unwilling to commit resources or troops, had left her with little more than words to stave off disaster. For weeks, she negotiated tirelessly, her patience fraying with each passing day. But the Zephyrians, sensing weakness, grew bolder, their demands more unreasonable. Kayla's frustration simmered beneath the surface, a quiet rage that she dared not show. She had always been the Empire's voice of reason, but now, for the first time, she questioned whether reason was enough. Back on the Empire's capital world, whispers of discontent began to spread. Among the diplomatic corps, a growing number of women shared Kayla's frustrations. They had spent their careers bending over backward to uphold a system that neither respected nor rewarded their efforts. For every Kayla Vera, there were dozens of lesser-known diplomats whose contributions went unnoticed, their voices silenced by the Empire's patriarchal hierarchy. The breaking point came when Councillor Draven, a man whose arrogance was matched only by his incompetence, publicly dismissed Kayla's concerns during a briefing. "Diplomacy is a woman's game," he sneered, his words echoing through the chamber. "If they can't handle it, perhaps we should find someone who can." The insult, delivered with such casual cruelty, ignited a firestorm. Kayla, watching the briefing from her quarters on Zephyria, felt something inside her snap. For years, she had swallowed her pride, her anger, her exhaustion, all for the sake of the Empire. But no more. She returned to the capital, her arrival marked by an uncharacteristic silence. The council, expecting her to fall in line as she always had, was unprepared for what came next. In a speech that would later be remembered as the turning point, Kayla addressed the assembled leaders, her voice steady but laced with steel. "You have taken our labor for granted," she said, her words cutting through the room like a blade. "You have demanded our patience, our empathy, our silence. But no more. If this is how you value diplomacy, then you will learn what happens when women stop being diplomatic." The room erupted in chaos, but Kayla was already walking away, her departure as final as it was symbolic. Across the Empire, her words resonated, a rallying cry for those who had long been marginalized. The Council, scrambling to contain the fallout, found itself facing an unprecedented challenge. Without its diplomats, the Empire's carefully constructed alliances began to crumble, its enemies emboldened by the sudden vacuum of leadership. And at the heart of it all was Kayla Vera, a woman who had once been the Empire's greatest asset and was now its greatest threat. As the first section of this tale draws to a close, the stage is set for a reckoning. The Galactic Empire, once a beacon of order and stability, now teeters on the brink of collapse. Its leaders, blinded by their own arrogance, must confront the consequences of their actions. And Kayla, no longer bound by the chains of diplomacy, stands poised to reshape the galaxy in ways no one could have predicted. The question is no longer whether change will come, but who will emerge from the ashes. The story is far from over, but one thing is certain: the age of unquestioning diplomacy has ended, and the galaxy will never be the same. The fallout from Kayla Vera's speech rippled across the Galactic Empire like a shockwave, leaving no corner untouched. Within days, the diplomatic corps, once a well-oiled machine, ground to a halt. Women who had spent their careers smoothing over conflicts, brokering treaties, and placating egos walked away en masse, their resignations delivered with a quiet finality that spoke volumes. The council, accustomed to deference, found itself adrift in uncharted waters. Without its diplomats, the empire's carefully cultivated alliances began to fray, its enemies sensing weakness and circling like vultures. At the heart of the storm was Kayla herself, now a figure of both reverence and fear. Her defiance had ignited a movement, but it had also made her a target. The council, desperate to regain control, dispatched agents to bring her in, but Kayla was no longer the compliant diplomat they remembered. She had vanished into the shadows, her whereabouts unknown, her influence growing with each passing day. Rumors spread like wildfire, she was rallying dissidents, forging new alliances, preparing to strike at the empire's heart. The truth, however, was far more complex. Kayla had retreated to the Outer Rim, a lawless region where the empire's reach was tenuous at best. There, she found herself among a ragtag group of rebels, smugglers, and disillusioned soldiers, all united by their hatred of the empire. At first, they viewed her with suspicion, her polished demeanor and imperial pedigree setting her apart. But Kayla, ever the strategist, quickly proved her worth. She brokered deals, mediated disputes, and earned their trust, her diplomatic skills now wielded not for the empire but against it. Yet, even as she adapted to her new role, she couldn't shake the weight of what she had left behind. Meanwhile, the empire's leaders scrambled to contain the crisis. Councillor Draven, his arrogance undiminished, insisted that the situation was temporary. "They'll come crawling back," he declared, his voice dripping with contempt. "They always do." But his confidence was misplaced. The women who had once upheld the empire's diplomatic facade were not returning. Instead, they were finding new ways to wield their power. On the industrial world of Krylos, former diplomat Lyra Tanner organized a workers' strike that brought production to a standstill. In the mining colonies of the Zephyrian Belt, ex-ambassador J.Y.N. Meris led a rebellion that seized control of critical supply lines. And on the capital world itself, whispers of dissent grew louder, fueled by the growing realization that the empire's strength had always been a fragile illusion. The council, increasingly desperate, turned to its military for solutions. Admiral Veyron, a grizzled veteran with little patience for politics, was tasked with restoring order. But even he recognized the futility of brute force. "You can't bomb your way out of this," he warned the council, his tone grim. "This isn't a rebellion, it's a reckoning." His words fell on deaf ears. The council, blinded by its own hubris, ordered a crackdown, unleashing the full might of the empire's forces on its own citizens. The results were catastrophic. Protests turned into riots, riots into uprisings, and the empire's grip on its territories grew ever more tenuous. Amid the chaos, Kayla remained a step ahead. Her network of allies expanded, her influence spreading like a virus through the empire's veins. She knew the council's weaknesses, its blind spots, its vulnerabilities, and she exploited them with surgical precision. But she also knew that victory would require more than just dismantling the old order, it would require building something new. And so, she began to lay the groundwork for a different kind of galaxy, one where power was not hoarded by a privileged few but shared by the many. The turning point came during the Battle of Krylos, a clash that would go down in history as the Empire's first major defeat. Kayla, working behind the scenes, had orchestrated a coalition of rebels, defectors, and disillusioned citizens. Together, they ambushed the Empire's forces, their coordinated strikes catching the enemy off guard. The battle was fierce, the outcome uncertain, but in the end, the Empire's troops were forced to retreat, their once vaunted reputation in tatters. For Kayla, it was a bittersweet victory. She had proven that the Empire could be beaten, but she also knew that the cost of freedom would be high. As the dust settled, the galaxy held its breath. The Empire, though wounded, was far from defeated. Its leaders, humiliated and enraged, vowed to crush the rebellion at any cost. But the tide had turned, and Kayla Vera, once the Empire's most loyal servant, was now its greatest threat. The stage was set for a final confrontation, one that would determine the fate of the galaxy. And as Kayla stood on the bridge of a stolen warship, gazing out at the stars, she allowed herself a moment of quiet resolve. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in her life, she felt truly free. The galaxy would never be the same, and neither would she. The Empire's collapse was not a single, cataclysmic event but a slow unraveling, like a thread pulled from the fabric of the galaxy. Kayla Vera, now the de facto leader of the rebellion, watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow as the once mighty empire crumbled under the weight of its own hubris. The council, its ranks fractured by infighting and betrayal, could no longer maintain the illusion of control. Systems declared independence, fleets defected, and the Empire's grip on the galaxy slipped away like sand through clenched fists. Yet, Kayla knew that victory was not guaranteed. The Empire's fall had created a vacuum, and nature abhorred a vacuum. On the outer rim, where the rebellion had taken root, Kayla worked tirelessly to forge a new order. Her days were a blur of strategy meetings, negotiations, and the occasional skirmish with Imperial loyalists. She had become a symbol, her name whispered with reverence by those who dreamed of a better future. But the weight of leadership was heavy, and the scars of her past, both physical and emotional, served as constant reminders of the cost of freedom. She had sacrificed everything for this cause, and she would not let it fail. The Council, desperate to cling to power, made one last, desperate gambit. They turned to Admiral Varen, the only military leader still loyal to the Empire, and gave him a single directive: eliminate Kayla Vera. Varen, a man of honor trapped in a web of corruption, accepted the mission with grim determination. He had no love for the Council, but he believed in the Empire's ideals, or at least, the ideals it had once represented. To him, Kayla was not a liberator but a traitor, and her vision of a new galaxy was a dangerous fantasy. He assembled a task force, handpicked for their loyalty and skill, and set out to end the rebellion once and for all. The final confrontation took place on the barren moon of Vera Prime, a desolate world that bore Kayla's name as a cruel irony. It was here, in the shadow of a crumbling Imperial outpost, that the two forces clashed. The battle was fierce, the air thick with the acrid smell of blaster fire and the cries of the wounded. Kayla, leading from the front, fought with a ferocity that surprised even her allies. She was no longer the polished diplomat of old, she was a warrior, her every move calculated and precise. Yet, as the battle raged on, she found herself face to face with Varen, his expression unreadable behind the visor of his helmet. Their duel was a clash of ideologies as much as it was a physical struggle. Varen, his voice strained with frustration, accused Kayla of tearing apart the galaxy for her own ambitions. "You think you're building something better," he spat, deflecting a blow from her vibroblade, "but all you've done is sow chaos." Kayla, her breath coming in ragged gasps, countered with equal fervor. "The Empire was built on lies," she shot back, her eyes blazing. "I'm giving people a chance to build something real." Their blades clashed again, the sound ringing out like a death knell, and for a moment, it seemed as though the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. In the end, it was not strength or skill that decided the outcome but a single, unspoken truth. Varen, his resolve wavering, hesitated, and in that moment, Kayla struck. Her blade found its mark, and Varen fell to his knees, his helmet slipping from his head to reveal a face etched with pain and regret. "You'll see," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the din of battle. "You'll see what happens when the old ways die." And with that, he was gone, his body collapsing to the ground as the fight drained from him. The battle ended soon after, the Imperial forces retreating in disarray. Kayla, standing amidst the wreckage, felt no triumph, only a profound sense of loss. Varen's words echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The Empire was gone, but its legacy remained, a shadow that would take generations to dispel. And as Kayla looked out at the stars, she knew that her work was far from over. In the weeks that followed, the rebellion began the arduous task of rebuilding. Kayla, now the leader of a fledgling coalition, worked to unite the disparate factions under a common banner. It was a daunting task, fraught with challenges and setbacks, but she approached it with the same determination that had brought her this far. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that the galaxy deserved a chance to heal. As the section draws to a close, Kayla stands on the bridge of a newly commissioned starship, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The stars, once symbols of the Empire's dominion, now represent something far greater: hope. The galaxy is forever changed, its future uncertain but brimming with possibility. And Kayla Vera, once a diplomat, then a rebel, now a leader, is ready to face whatever comes next. The story is far from over, but one thing is certain: the age of the Empire has ended, and a new chapter has begun. The galaxy, now free from the Empire's iron grip, was a patchwork of fledgling alliances and independent systems, each struggling to find its place in the new order. Kayla Vera, the architect of this transformation, stood at the helm of the nascent Galactic coalition, a fragile union born from the ashes of rebellion. Her days were consumed by the delicate balancing act of governance, as she sought to unite worlds with vastly different histories, cultures, and ambitions. The task was Herculean, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was hope, a fragile, flickering light that she clung to with unwavering determination. The coalition's first major test came in the form of the Zephyrian Crisis, a dispute over resource distribution that threatened to fracture the fragile alliance before it could fully take root. The Zephyrian belt, rich in rare minerals, had long been a source of contention, and with the Empire's collapse, old rivalries resurfaced with a vengeance. Kayla, ever the diplomat, knew that failure to resolve the crisis would spell disaster for the coalition. She convened a summit on the neutral world of Elysian, inviting representatives from the Zephyrian colonies, the industrial worlds, and the Outer Rim factions. The stakes were high, and the tension in the air was palpable. As the summit began, Kayla found herself facing a familiar adversary, Councillor Draven, the last surviving member of the Empire's ruling council. Once a figure of immense power, he was now a shadow of his former self, his influence diminished but his cunning undimmed. He had aligned himself with the Zephyrian factions, using his silver tongue to stoke the flames of discord. Kayla, though wary of his intentions, knew that his presence could not be ignored. "You've come a long way, Ambassador," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "But can you truly hold this galaxy together, or will it tear itself apart under your watch?" The summit quickly devolved into chaos, with accusations and counter-accusations flying across the table. Kayla, her patience wearing thin, struggled to maintain control. She had always relied on her ability to mediate, to find common ground, but this was different. The wounds of the past were too fresh, the distrust too deep. For the first time in her life, she felt the limits of diplomacy, the futility of words in the face of entrenched animosity. It was a humbling realization, one that left her questioning her own abilities. But Kayla was not alone. Among the delegates was Lyra Tanner, the former diplomat-turned-rebel leader who had played a pivotal role in the Empire's downfall. Lyra, with her sharp mind and unyielding resolve, had become one of Kayla's most trusted allies. Sensing her friend's struggle, Lyra stepped in, her voice cutting through the cacophony like a blade. "We didn't fight a war just to repeat the mistakes of the past," she said, her tone firm. "If we can't find a way to work together, then everything we've fought for will mean nothing." Her words struck a chord, and the room fell silent. Kayla, inspired by Lyra's intervention, seized the moment. She proposed a compromise, one that would allocate resources equitably while ensuring that the Zephyrian colonies retained a degree of autonomy. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a start, a foundation upon which trust could be built. The delegates, though hesitant, agreed to the terms, and the crisis was averted. For Kayla, it was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. She had proven that the coalition could weather its first storm, but she knew that many more lay ahead. As the summit drew to a close, Kayla found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She had started as a diplomat, a cog in the Empire's machine, and had become a leader, a symbol of hope for millions. But with that hope came expectation, and the burden of leadership was heavier than she had ever imagined. She thought of Varen, his final words echoing in her mind, "You'll see what happens when the old ways die." He had been right, in a way. The old ways were gone, but the new ones were still being written, and the responsibility of shaping them fell to her. The section ends with Kayla standing on the balcony of the summit hall, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy was vast and unknowable, its future uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of optimism. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face them. The coalition was fragile, but it was alive, and that was enough. As she turned to rejoin the delegates, a sense of purpose filled her. The story was far from over, and the galaxy was watching.